As one of my brothers once said to me, if you get any grief, tell me. Nobody's allowed to hit you except me. And he meant it. I hero-worshipped my older brothers for a time, Mark especially. But I'd learned over time that the blessing in disguise his protection offered was more like a smack on the head from a poisoned chalice. There was only 3 years separating myself from Mark, and 4 from Rob, but it was a chasm as far as they were concerned, and my reluctance to want to prove myself in their alpha pecking order only made it wider. Although we're as close as brothers can be now, with much water under the bridge, at that time, and especially with the introduction of alcohol into their adolescence, the line between natural goading and the testing of each other's brotherly patience blurred. Rob was pure physical, and really heavy-handed with his poundings. They lacked panache, but as Mark was more controlled, more psychological, only ever hitting me with an open hand, and belittling me further in the process, by reducing me to the rank of a domestically abused housewife from the 1950s. He'd always been a master of it, and wanted to provoke a response because, I reckon, knowing my reluctance to fight, plus the fact that I didn't stand a chance against him if I did, meant he couldn't bring himself to hit me properly unless I went for him first. So he'd goad me until I did. I always preferred an honest-to-goodness beating off of our Robert than 12 rounds of psychoanalysis from our Mark. Bruises fade, but shit sticks. Years earlier, he'd managed to convince me that I was adopted. The methods of persuasion were really well thought out and actually quite brilliant, and his performance itself was definitely worth a BAFTA nod. It started with a casual matter-of-fact, "You do know by now that you're adopted, don't you?" I gave him the sarcastic, nice try smile, and continued trying to read me comic. I mean, you just have to look at you to see that. This was really amateur stuff by his standards, and so far-fetched that it didn't even warrant a verbal response as far as I was concerned. I mean, look at us lot, and look at you. There's no other chubbies in the family, is there? Just you. I was going to get up and leave, as I wasn't in the mood for fatty references, when he baited the hook a little bit more and let it dangle. Haven't you ever noticed how there's hardly any photos of you when you were younger? Now, the odd thing was that I had noticed this, not realising that the novelty of taking pictures tends to lessen with each new addition to the family. I'd often wondered why I featured so little in the biscuit tin of family memories. And the baby pictures, well, they could just be anybody a bit like you. At this point, I did the stupidest thing ever. I bit. I took the bait and responded with a well-considered, "Shut up." That's when he knew he had me. Sitting down beside me and giving a sigh like a parent might before discussing a matter of delicate nature with a child, he changed his tone to a mixture of sincerity and slight remorse. That's why we never have proper birthday parties. Which we didn't. Well, not in the traditional invitation to friends to come and play pass the parcel kind of way. We'd have a tea party, and Mum would put on a spread a bit like a buffet with all sorts of treats, but it was kept within the immediate family. It's because they don't exactly know what date your birthday is. They just chose a random date out of thin air, you know, so you won't feel left out. For some stupid reason, it started to make complete sense. Invisible pieces of a puzzle I'd been ignorant of until his mischief had brought it to my attention all seemed to slot into place. By now, I was listening, because he'd got me believing it completely. I mean, you must have asked yourself why we've never been abroad before, eh? Why we always went to Butlins. I shook my head. My bottom lip quivered and my eyes were welling up. No. Why? Well, they've no birth certificate for you, so they can't get you a passport, see? And they couldn't just take us abroad without giving the game away, could they? I shook my head, determined not to cry, but really struggling to contain the fact that I'd found the recent disclosure that a huge chunk of my upbringing had been a lie, a conspiracy that the whole family was in on apart from me, more than just a little bit upsetting. And then Mark did a most unusual thing that was a stroke of despicable genius. He put his arm around me and side-hugged me. If I'd had a shred of doubt before that what he was saying wasn't true, then that gesture, alien to normal brotherly interactions, quashed it. I'm sorry. I thought you knew. And then he got conspiratorial on my ass. I tell you what, I'll break into Dad's bureau if you want. Let you take a look for yourself. But I bet you won't find anything. That was the final nail in my Pennington DNA coffin. I think his intention was for me to lash out in anger. See it for the cruel joke that it was and throw a punch that would justify a full-on confrontation. What he didn't expect was for me to turn off in tears looking for direct answers from my adoptive mum and dad, because our brains, although born of the same biological parents, simply didn't work alike. Instead, Mark caught me, and muzzling me with one hand and both restraining and lifting me with the other, carried me to a safe distance over at Hankey's well, all the while me kicking and screaming inaudibly. He sat me down and waited impatiently for me crying to stop. Of course you're one of us, you soft fat tart. I'm still telling Mum, I said, but I didn't. He bought me silence with 7 benching and edges and sabres on the cig he'd already lit.